I diligently cared for it for years. And finally, the egg cracked open, but the very first sound I made was,
Where did this thing come from? Where is my daughter? Give me back my daughter. That was the last phoenix in the world.
Father.
Shut up. Who is your father?
Xuanqingzi tossed me away like a hot potato.
Where did you hide my daughter?
I am your daughter. It is just that something might have gone slightly wrong during my incubation.
A phoenix hatching a green ox? And a common farm ox at that. Do you think I've lived all these years for nothing?
Ho. Maybe when mother secretly ate the elixir ingredients before she passed, she accidentally mixed in some green ox feed from Yunxiao Palace. Hearing this, my father almost fainted. Just then, the morning bell of Yunxiao Palace rang. My father scooped me up in one swift motion and stuffed me into his wide sleeve.
Don't make a sound. If anyone finds out you're an ox child, where will I hide my old face?
He carried me toward Qingshu Pavilion. I poked my head out. Father, I'm hungry.
Then starve.
He plucked a handful of tender grass from the roadside and angrily stuffed it into his sleeve. The old man was tough on the outside, but soft on the inside. We dodged and hid all the way to his residence, Qingshu Pavilion, but we ran right into Uncle Yuhengzi, who loved gossip more than anyone.
Senior brother Xuanqing, I heard your precious egg hatched today. Why don't I see? The little phoenix?
My father hid his sleeve behind his back.
There was a little accident.
Yuhengzi was so startled that his fan dropped to the ground with a clatter.
Where did an ox come from in the 9 heavens?
I took the opportunity to wriggle out. Hello, uncle. My name is Xuan Minghua.
Minghua, my foot. Who allowed you to take the surname Xuan? And who gave you that name anyway?
Yuhengzi stood frozen like a wooden statue. It took him a long moment to find his voice.
Senior brother, is this the little phoenix?
No.
Yes, I am. The real deal guaranteed. Look at my horn. Doesn't it look just like your Qingshuang sword? My father's beard twitched with rage.
Get down from there.
I won't. Unless you admit that I am your daughter. Passing disciples stopped to watch, pointing and whispering. My father's face flushed red. He whispered,
Get down first. We can talk this over.
Then call me Minghua. My father's eyes darkened. Minghua, that was his late wife's name.
Minghua.
I jumped down joyfully and didn't forget to nuzzle his arm with my head. Father is the best.
Haha. Senior brother, congratulations. This phoenix is certainly unique.
On the way back to Qingshu Pavilion, my father sighed 3 times with every step he took. I jogged to keep up behind him. Walk a bit slower. My legs are short.
Shut up.
I want to eat the herbs on the back mountain.
In your dreams.
Look at that cloud. Doesn't it look like an ox?
Just who sent you to torture me?
Didn't mother tell you before she passed? Phoenixes and green oxen are closely related. It is written in the books.
Nonsense. Which chapter of the ancient texts says that? Point it out to me.
I felt a bit guilty. Maybe it was a picture book. That night, my father locked me in the alchemy room. Inside, I tasted every single herb and ingredient. In the end, I fell asleep hugging the cinnabar jar. In the middle of the night, my dad sneaked in and pushed the door open. He covered me with a blanket. Drowsily, I heard him sigh.
Forget it. Forget it. After all, you are what your mother left behind.
Early the next morning, the entire Yunxiao Palace knew that Elder Xuanqingzi had gotten a little green ox. The sect leader came in person to see the fun, stroking his beard and laughing merrily.
Wonderful. Since the founding of our Yunxiao Palace, thousands of years ago, this is the very first time a spiritual beast has become a disciple.
Sect leader uncle, can I participate in next month's initiation ceremony? The sect leader smiled and patted my head.
Of course, by seniority, you should participate too.
Yay, yay.
Sect leader, senior brother. This is against the rules.
Rules are made by people. Minghua, I heard that yesterday. You nibbled all the spiritual herbs in the alchemy room.
I just had a little taste.
Those were 100-year-old spiritual herbs.
No matter, no matter. Minghua, since you want to enter Yunxiao Palace, you must have a master.
I want to learn from my dad.
Wishful thinking.
Then it is settled. Junior brother Xuanqing, teach this special disciple of yours well.
My dad watched the sect leader float away in despair. Just take me in. I promise to study hard and not steal spiritual herbs. I'll try my best.
Highs. My wife. Is this the surprise you left for me?
I still officially became a disciple of Yunxiao Palace. As for why a human gave birth to a green ox, even sect leader uncle couldn't explain it. Perhaps my mother really ate something she shouldn't have back then. Or perhaps this was a joke that the heavenly Tao played on my old-fashioned dad. On my second day as a disciple of Yunxiao Palace, my dad set 17 sect rules for me.
Rule number 1. You are not allowed to call me dad in public.
Chewing on the spiritual grass I stole from the back mountain, I asked indistinctly, what about in private?
Not in private either.
What about in my dreams? The fly whisk smacked onto my forehead with a snap.
Rule number 2. No. Stealing spiritual herbs.
But I'm a herbivore. Seeing spiritual herbs is like you seeing nectar and wine. How can I resist? My dad took a deep breath and continued to read.
Rule number 3. No. Snoring during cultivation.
I can't guarantee this one. We green oxen all snore when we sleep. It is ancestral. My dad was so angry that his fly whisk kept shaking. I quickly rubbed my head against his palm. Look at my newly grown horns, aren't they prettier? This trick worked every single time. My dad's attention was indeed diverted. He glanced at me with disgust, looking at the 2 small bumps on my head.
They look more like potatoes.
As we were speaking, footsteps came from outside the door. My dad stuffed me behind the screen in one swift motion. The one who came in was eldest senior brother Xuanqingzi, that guy who always looked at people with his nostrils.
Master, I have come to retrieve the Yunxiao sword manual.
Eldest senior brother's gaze drifted toward the screen.
I heard you took in a rather unique disciple.
Hello, eldest senior brother. I am Xuan Minghua. Eldest senior brother's expression looked exactly as if he had swallowed a toad. I happily ran out and deliberately rubbed against his snow-white Taoist robe. I had just rolled in a mud pit.
Junior sister is indeed unique.
She wants. Starting today, you will guide her in cultivating the basic mental cultivation methods.
Master, I still need to prepare for the sword debate conference.
My master pretended not to hear him.
It is settled then. Your junior sister is exceptionally gifted. She will surely, diligence, can make up for a lack of talent.
As soon as eldest senior brother left with a long face, I immediately bounced over to my master. Are you really going to make me learn from that guy who keeps his nose in the air?
Call me master. And also, that is your eldest senior brother.
I got it. On my first day of training with eldest senior brother, I set 3 major records at Yunxiao Palace, nodding off the most times during meditation, memorizing the mental cultivation mantras as recipes, and soaking 3 secret manuals with my drool.
The sky is dark, the earth is yellow, the universe is vast and boundless.
I sprawled on the cushion, half asleep, braised chicken wings, braised pig trotters.
Xuan Minghua.
Eldest senior brother, are we having braised pig trotters for lunch?
You are like rotten wood that cannot be carved. It is like playing a lute to a cow.
But I am a cow. In the afternoon, during sword riding practice, I caused an even bigger scene. While the other senior brothers and sisters stepped on their flying swords looking ethereal and elegant, I secretly copied them and stepped onto my flying sword too. My junior senior sister, Xuan Minghua, was jumping up and down anxiously below. It is fine, we green oxen have excellent balance. Before the words had fully left my mouth, I plunged headfirst, sword and all, right through the roof of the alchemy chamber, crushing a fresh batch of pills that Martial Uncle Yuheng had just refined. Martial Uncle Yuheng chased me for 3 miles holding half a broken fly whisk. In the end, my master had to step in and compensate him with 3 bottles of nectar to settle the matter. That night, my master ordered me to face the wall and reflect on my mistakes. Facing the wall, I chewed on the tender grass he had secretly slipped to me. Am I really stupid? My master sighed and sat down beside me.
Not necessarily. You're just too much of a troublemaker.
But I really want to make progress. You are a grand sword cultivator. I can't just be a useless glutton for the rest of my life.
The road ahead is long and arduous. You must not rush. Starting tomorrow, I will teach you personally.
I kicked up my heels in sheer joy. Really? Then can I learn sword riding? Like the kind I did today.
Don't even think about it. We start with learning characters.
The next morning, before my master had even woken up, I had already chewed through every single illustrated book, had chewed through them all. By the time he found out, I was chewing on the very last page. My master pried my mouth open, but with a loud gulp, I swallowed it down and let out a loud burp. My master's teaching style was much more interesting than eldest senior brother's. He took me to the waterfall in the back mountain and made me recite the mantras while resisting the rushing water. Every time I got a word wrong, he would stuff a handful of bitter herbs into my mouth. I chewed with a grimace. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. My tongue is numb.
Serves you right. Keep reciting.
Half a month later, I had finally memorized everything he taught me. My master's brow finally relaxed a bit, and he took me to the library pavilion to choose a cultivation method.
The purple cloud art is too fierce. The profound ice mantra is too cold. With your constitution, what should you practice?
While he wasn't looking, I swallowed a manual in one gulp.
Xuan Minghua.
I chewed twice and frowned. It doesn't taste good. It burns my throat. My master frantically tried to pry my mouth open. In my panic, I let out a sneeze, and a small flame shot out of my nose, setting his beard on fire. The library pavilion fell into utter chaos. My master patted out the fire on his beard.
You can breathe fire.
Maybe it is because the chili powder I sneaked yesterday hasn't digested yet. My master grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and headed straight for the sect leader. After hearing the whole story, the sect leader laughed so hard he slapped his thigh.
Wonderful. A green ox breathing fire, an unprecedented wonder.
Sect leader, senior brother. This troublemaker burned down half of the library of scriptures.
Manhwa, make sure to sneeze facing the pond in the future, okay?
Understood. Sect leader martial uncle. I turned a disaster into a blessing and obtained the qualification to practice the Samadhi true fire formula. Although my master insisted this was a complete waste of a precious resource. At the initiation ceremony, a month later, I formally joined the Yunxiao Palace. When I offered tea to my master with my two horns showing, someone in the crowd couldn't hold it in and let out a snort, which set off a burst of laughter from the whole hall. My master's hand trembled slightly as he took the tea. It was probably out of anger. Master, I will definitely become very powerful in the future and make everyone envy you for having such a good disciple. The corner of my master's mouth twitched. In the end, he couldn't help but gently pat my horns.
Just cause less trouble.
3 months after the initiation ceremony, the decennial sword debate conference of Yunxiao Palace began. My master had been restless since a month ago. Every day before dawn, he would drag me out of the haystack to practice swordplay, but my spiritual power was low, and the transformation of my hands was highly unstable. For the countless time, I dropped the Qing sword on the ground. He. I think holding the sword in my mouth is actually quite good.
Yunxiao Palace has been established for 10,000 years and has never had a disciple who competes with their mouth.
Then can I be the first one? I excitedly picked up the sword with my mouth again, but the blade scraped across my nose, making my eyes water from the pain. My master let out a long sigh.
Use this instead. This is a specially made hoof sheath. It can firmly secure the hilt to your front hoof.
Father, when did you make this? My father's ears turned slightly red.
Cut the crap. If you don't practice well, tonight's tender bamboo shoots will be docked.
The day before the sword debate conference, while I was stealing food in the kitchen, I heard first senior brother Xuanqingzi and several other senior brothers gossiping.
I heard Xuan Minghua is also participating. Antics participating in the sword debate conference? What a joke. Haha.
Master is so biased. He even plans to lend her the Qing sword.
Didn't they say that sword was broken in the Great War hundreds of years ago? Even the sword spirit was destroyed.
Master recast it using rare materials, but it is a pity the sword spirit has never responded.
I was so angry that I crunched the carrot in my mouth loudly. Little senior sister Xuan Minghua suddenly appeared.
Junior sister, don't listen to their nonsense. I think you are incredibly amazing.
Senior sister, can I really win?
Of course, you can breathe fire. You're the only one in the entire Yunxiao Palace who can.
That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, so I sneaked to the back mountain to practice. I recalled the mantra from the manual. I tried to channel the true fire onto the sword. With a loud whoosh, the entire sword burst into raging flames. It scared me so much I almost threw the sword away. Once I calmed down, I realized I had succeeded. I ran back to Qingshu Pavilion in high spirits, wanting to tell my master. But then I heard the sect leader uncle's voice coming from inside.
Manhwa indeed has the divine phoenix vein inside her. It is just unknown why she manifested as a green ox.
Today she channeled the true fire onto the sword. She looks just like her mother did back then.
I held my breath, pricking up my ears as high as they could go. My mother. This was the first time my master had ever brought her up on his own initiative.
After the sword assembly, it will be time to let her go to the sword tomb cliff.
I was listening so intently that I couldn't help but sneeze. The sparks shooting from my nose set the door curtain on fire again. By the time my dad and the sect master rushed out, I was frantically patting out the flames with my hooves.
Xuan Minghua.
My dad's roar startled a whole forest of birds into flight. On the day of the sword assembly, the entire Yunxiao Palace was packed with people. I was so nervous that I kept gnawing on my sword hilt.
First match, Xuan Minghua versus Xuan Mingfeng.
I almost choked on my own spit. Second, senior brother. Xuan Minghua was the very one who had been badmouthing me the other day. I marched onto the arena with my head held high, only to trip on the steps and roll right onto the stage, drawing bursts of laughter from the entire crowd.
Junior sister, it is not too late to admit defeat now.
I stood up and shook my fur. Senior brother, please guide me. After saying that, I even gave a proper formal bow, though bowing with hooves looked more like I was trying to scratch an itch. As soon as the gong sounded, second senior brother's sword thrust toward me. I hurriedly raised my sword to parry. With a loud clang, the impact left my hooves completely numb. After 3 rounds, I was purely on the defensive, with absolutely no chance to strike back. Someone in the crowd started jeering.
See, I told you. How could a cow ever be suited for swordplay?
Fuming with anger, smoke billowed from my nostrils, recalling my discovery from last night. With a single thought, the blade suddenly erupted into flames. Second senior brother was startled.
This is unfair. You can't use that in the sword assembly.
The rules never said I couldn't breathe fire.
Taking advantage of the opening, I used a move called Old Ox Plowing the Field. With a fierce charge, I forced second senior brother to the very edge of the arena. In his desperation, he unleashed the white rainbow piercing the sun technique. Unable to dodge in time, a small section of my left horn was sliced off. My horn. In my fury, the true fire within my body erupted uncontrollably. The flames on the sword instantly surged threefold. With a move called Fiery Bull charging the formation, I knocked second senior brother straight off the arena. The entire arena fell dead silent. I stood on the stage, while the flames on the sword condensed into a fiery Qilin, roaring toward the heavens. Uncle Yuheng was the first to react.
Xuan Minghua wins.
My dad leaped down from the viewing platform, rushing onto the arena in a few quick strides. Thinking he was going to scold me, I pulled back my neck, bracing myself for a lecture, only to be pulled into a tight embrace.
Does it hurt?
Dad, I'm disfigured.
Silly girl.
Only then did I notice that my dad's eyes were slightly red. I won.
You won so clumsily.
Though my dad spoke with mock disdain, he stuffed an elixir into my mouth. The next match against Xuanqingzi won't be this easy. First senior brother Xuanqingzi was the champion of the previous assembly. During the break, I saw him staring coldly at me from below the stage. That look sent a shiver down my spine. My senior sister leaned in to wipe my sweat.
Junior sister, first senior brother's frost sword Qi is the perfect counter to fire. You must be careful.
Chewing on the elixir my dad gave me, I mumbled indistinctly. It is fine. I still have a secret weapon. Before the semi-finals began, my dad called me aside.
Minghua, remember, if you can't win, just concede. There is no shame in it.
Father, are you afraid I'll lose? I'm afraid you'll burn the arena down. My master raised his fly whisk again, but in the end, it landed gently on my head.
Be careful.
The duel with first senior brother was indeed difficult. As we crossed paths, my senior brother whispered,
Do you really think Master treats you as his daughter? He is just obsessed with that beast.
I trembled with rage. The true fire within my body erupted uncontrollably. The flames on my sword turned pure white. The frost on the arena instantly evaporated. Don't you dare talk about my mother. With a move of Mad Bull swings its tail, I lunged toward first senior brother. First senior brother clearly didn't expect me to have any strength left. He blocked in a hurry. As our swords clashed, his sword actually snapped with a loud crack. The crowd erupted in an uproar. First senior brother looked at the broken sword in his hand, his face pale as death. According to the rules, the one with the broken weapon loses.
Xuan Minghua wins.
Before I could recover from the shock, I saw a flash of malice in first senior brother's eyes. He quietly raised his hand, and a cold light shot straight toward my heart. My father's shout came from afar. Instinctively, I opened my mouth and spat out a blast of pure white fire. The cold light dissolved into nothingness within the flames, and the remaining force of the fire column went straight for first senior brother's face. At the critical moment, sect leader uncle waved his sleeve, and a curtain of water blocked the path in front of first senior brother. After the steam dispersed, first senior brother was slumped on the ground.
Xuanqingzi violated the rules of the competition by using a concealed weapon to harm someone. He is sentenced to 3 years of solitary meditation. The champion of this sword conference is Xuan Minghua.
Before I could react, I was thrown into the air by little senior sister and a crowd of disciples. In my daze, I saw my father standing at the edge of the crowd, the corners of his mouth slightly turned up. The Qingshu pavilion was exceptionally lively that night. The sect leader, Uncle Yuheng, and the elders of each peak all came to congratulate me, and they brought a bunch of gifts. After the crowd dispersed, I lay on the floor counting my gifts, while my father sat to one side drinking tea. I proudly shook my chipped horn. Am I amazing?
It was just a stroke of luck.
Then can I learn even more powerful sword techniques from you in the future?
Copy your cultivation manual. 10 times first before we talk. That move of fire tree and silver flowers you used today was crude in its form.
And relied entirely on brute force. I call that mad bull swings its tail. I listened to his nagging with a grin. Suddenly, I remembered something. Father, where is the cliff that sect leader uncle mentioned? My master's hand trembled, spilling half of his tea. He remained silent for a long time, and finally spoke.
It is the place where your mother lived before she passed away.
I nudged closer to him. Father, can you tell me about my mother?
Her. She was the most stubborn beast in the world.
Stubborn. Isn't that just like a cow? Do you think my mother was actually a cow too?
Shut up.
On the morning of the 7th day after the sword conference ended, when my master dragged me out of the hay pile, I was dreaming of myself turning into a majestic beast.
Get up. The sun is already high in the sky.
I opened my eyes sleepily and found him carrying a bundle on his back. Are you leaving to become a monk?
What nonsense are you talking about? Today, I'm taking you to the cliff.
I woke up instantly, springing up with a leap. Are we really going to see Mother?
To retrieve the things your mother left behind.
To get from Yunxiao Palace to the cliff, one must cross 3 mountains and 2 rivers. My master originally wanted to fly me over on his sword, but I insisted on walking. The books say that cultivation lies in the journey. In truth, I was just afraid of heights. My master couldn't win against me. We had to walk instead. Along the way, I ran around joyfully like a wild thing. I picked mushrooms whenever I saw them, nibbled on wild fruits whenever I found them, and chased rabbits all over the mountain whenever I spotted them. My dad pulled me out of a bush.
Xuan Minghua, you are a bull, not a dog.
That rabbit was making fun of my short horns. At noon, we took a break by a small stream. My dad took some dry rations out of his bundle, while I buried my entire head in the stream water, drinking with loud gulps. I lifted my head and shook it, splashing water droplets everywhere. What did Mother look like? My dad paused mid-sip. He pulled out a plain white handkerchief.
She loved to smile, and she was very stubborn, even though she was of the most noble golden lineage.
Then did I inherit this gluttonous habit from Mother? My dad raised his fly whisk out of habit again, but it landed gently on the top of my head. At dusk, we finally arrived at the foot of the cliff. It was a steep mountain peak. The summit was shrouded in clouds and mist, with a faint golden light shimmering through. My dad adjusted his robes and hat, his expression turning solemn.
Keep close to me. Don't run off.
The path up the mountain was rugged and difficult to walk. My hooves slipped several times. My dad couldn't bear to watch anymore. He picked me up and with a few leaps, reached the summit. In the center of the flat summit stood a crystal clear piece of jade.
A Qilin reverts to its original stone form after death. This is where your mother spent her final moments.
I carefully nudged the jade with my nose. A trace of warmth came through, as if responding to my touch. Mother. For some reason, my tears began to fall. My dad turned his back to me, his shoulders trembling slightly. I nudged my way to his side. Dad, don't cry.
Who is crying? Before your mother left, she left something for you inside this stone. Only someone of her bloodline can retrieve it.
I leaned in close to the jade curiously. How do I retrieve it? My dad was uncharacteristically honest.
I don't know. She said you would naturally understand when the time came.
I circled the jade 3 times, butting it with my horns, tapping it with my hooves, and even trying to breathe fire to roast it. The jade did not budge at all. I was so tired my tongue was hanging out. Mother was lying, wasn't she?
Calm your mind. The Qilin inheritance relies on bloodline resonance, not brute force.
I meditated, copying my dad's posture. Although with my body shape, I looked more like a squatting lump of sticky rice cake. I closed my eyes and tried to feel that warm current inside my body. Gradually, I felt that inside the jade, something was calling out to me. The horns on my head began to grow hot, and a warm current flowed from the base of my horns throughout my body. My horns hurt. My dad opened his eyes instantly.
Minghua, your horns.
I was stunned. It turned out my horns had turned into crystal clear crystal horns. At the same time, the jade emitted a dazzling golden light, and a brocade pouch emerged on its surface. I took down the brocade pouch. Inside was a glittering golden scale and a note. The note read,
To my dearest baby, whether you are a bull or a Qilin, remember to be happy every day. Love, Mother.
I burst into tears with a loud sob, clutching both the scale and the note tightly to my chest. I leaned in to take a look.
This scale is.
What is a reverse scale?
Dragons have reverse scales. Touch them, and they will fly into a rage. Qilin have them too, but they never give them away lightly.
Just as I was about to ask why, a sharp pain shot through my crystal horn. A massive flood of information rushed into my mind. My clan's ancestral inheritance had awakened. I rolled around on the ground in agony. The green fur on my body began to shed, revealing golden scales underneath. My dad panicked.
Minghua, what is happening?
I felt like my body was being torn apart. My bones let out cracking sounds. Just when I thought I was going to die from the pain, a cool, refreshing energy flowed from the scale. The pain gradually subsided. I scrambled up, panting heavily, only to find that I was still a cow. Except now, I was a glittering golden cow with a crystal horn. My dad was completely dumbfounded. I tried to sense the changes inside my body. What I breathed out was no longer fire, but a beam of golden light that blasted a distant boulder into pieces. I kicked up my heels in excitement. Did I just become super powerful? Before my dad could even answer, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and a bolt of lightning struck straight down.
It is a heavenly tribulation.
He quickly pulled me out of the way. The lightning struck the boulder, actually cracking it open. Immediately after, a second and third bolt struck in rapid succession, aiming directly at me. Panicking, I ran blindly, scurrying all over the place. But my crystal horn acted like a lightning rod, chasing me down with the lightning bolts.
Minghua, press the scale to your forehead.
I quickly did as he said. The moment it touched my forehead, a beam of golden light shot up into the sky, colliding with the final bolt of heavenly lightning and erupting in a deafening explosion. Once the smoke and dust cleared, I was sprawled on the ground, covered in soot, but miraculously unharmed. My dad rushed over to check on me, his hands trembling. I coughed and stood up. I'm fine, Dad. I'm okay. Amazingly, I had actually grown a Qilin tail. It was a huge step forward. My dad looked like he wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. In the end, he just gave my head a rough rub.
You're just as much trouble as your mother.
It was late at night by the time we headed down the mountain. I walked in front, proudly wagging my newly grown Qilin tail. My dad followed behind, occasionally reaching out to touch the jade pendant left behind by the boulder. After I triggered the tribulation, the boulder cracked open, revealing a jade pendant carved with a Qilin pattern hidden inside. Why did mother leave her scale to me? My dad was silent for a moment.
The reverse scale is the hardest scale on the body, but it is also where the heart lies.
So mother gave me her heart.
Yes, she turned her most vulnerable part into your strongest armor.
My nose tickled, and tears were about to fall again. My dad quickly changed the subject.
Practice hard when we get back. This half-baked transformation of yours is incredibly ugly.
I wagged my tail. I get it. Under the moonlight, the two figures, one old and one young, walked further and further away. The older one would occasionally swat the younger one with his fly whisk, while the younger one kept trying to trip the older one with her newly grown tail. 3 days after returning from Qilin Cliff, I was in the back hills practicing how to control my Qilin tail. This thing was much harder to use than a cow's tail. When I swung it, I often ended up hitting myself in the face. Left. Spin around. I focused all my attention on directing my tail, but I put too much force into it, and with a loud smack, it whipped me right in the eye. The pain had me hopping all over the place. A soft chuckle came from behind a tree. Squinting through my swollen red eye, I looked over. My eldest senior brother, Xuanqingzi, was leaning against the tree trunk with a face full of mockery. Your 3 years of reflection ended so quickly. My senior brother's face darkened.
Master is biased, and the sect leader shields his own. But today I want to see just what is so special about you, little calf.
Only then did I notice that what he held in his hand was not a sword, but a pitch-black iron whip. The soul-dispersing whip of Yunxiao Palace. It was said that this weapon was extremely cruel. Senior brother, have you lost your mind? Using forbidden weapons violates the sect rules.
Sect rules, ever since you arrived. Has Yunxiao Palace had any rules left?
Before his voice even faded, the soul-dispersing whip struck like a venomous serpent. I scrambled to dodge, but the tip of the whip still grazed my front hoof. Instantly, a bone-chilling cold rushed straight to my head. I gasped, inhaling a sharp breath of cold air. The bloodline within my body was provoked.
Stop putting on an act.
The soul-dispersing whip danced into a black net, surrounding me completely. I lunged left and dashed right, but I still took several hits. The pain brought tears to my eyes. To make matters worse, every time I was whipped, the Qilin power inside me grew more chaotic.
Look at your ugly appearance. Master actually refused to take my sister as a disciple, all because of a creature like you.
So that was it. Suddenly, it all made sense. No wonder he had been targeting me all this time. I tried to reason with him. Accepting disciples depends on fate, but a whip strike cut me right across the mouth.
Shut up. Today, I will strip you of your Qilin bone and see how arrogant you can be then.
How did he know about the Qilin bone? Before I could figure it out, the soul-dispersing whip came straight for my forehead. At the critical moment, I instinctively lowered my head to block it with my horn. To my surprise, the whip was split into two by my crystal horn. Xuanqingzi stood there dumbfounded. Then, he flew into a rage.
How dare you destroy my whip?
He cast aside the broken whip. He reached out directly to grab my forehead. Unable to dodge in time, I had my scale gripped tightly by him. Amidst the excruciating pain, I heard a sharp, metallic ring. The reverse scale fused into my forehead. A blinding golden light erupted from my forehead. Xuanqingzi was blasted back several yards, only stopping after snapping 3 trees. Meanwhile, I was enveloped in a golden fire, and my body began to transform uncontrollably. When the golden light dispersed, I looked down and saw that they were no longer hooves, but claws covered in golden scales. I had turned into a dragon. I shook my head in disbelief. My crystal horn was now slender and elegant. Xuanqingzi struggled to stand up, his face turning deathly pale upon seeing my appearance. I tried to take a step. The surging power was terrifying. A casual swipe of my claw left 5 deep grooves in the rock. Senior brother. It is not too late to apologize. Xuanqingzi, however, began to sneer maliciously.
Very well. My lord will surely be very pleased.
My lord? Hadn't he always referred to him as master? He pulled out a talisman and crushed it. Instantly, a thick black mist filled the air. A terrifying roar, sending shivers down my spine, echoed from the mist. You actually colluded with demons. 3 demonic beasts pounced at the same time. I hastily met their attack. Although my strength had increased immensely, I didn't know how to use it yet, and quickly fell into a disadvantage. Dad, help. As luck would have it, my dad actually showed up, bringing along the entire council of elders from the Yunxiao Palace.
You wicked disciple.
Seeing that things were going badly, Xuanqingzi turned and fled, only to be knocked to the ground by my dad.
Minghua.
I lay down pitifully, showing him my injured front leg. It hurts. My dad frantically pulled out some medicine, only to realize that I was now twice his size.
Sect master senior brother, come and help.
A quarter of an hour later, I shrank back into my ox form. To be precise, it was a strange form with a dragon's tail and a crystal horn. The dragon scale was no longer visible, having completely merged into my forehead. Inside the main hall of Yunxiao Palace, the sect master uncle interrogated him personally.
Speak, who is your master?
Xuanqingzi sneered and remained silent. My dad stepped forward and ripped open his collar.
The Netherworld Dragon, wasn't he? 300 years ago?
He was severely wounded by Lady Manhwa, but he didn't die. It seems he has been plotting all this time.
I perked up my ears. My mother had fought him.
Back then, your mother only fell because she had to seal the Netherworld Dragon.
Before he could finish speaking, the main hall suddenly shook violently. The panicked cries of disciples came from the distance.
The mountain protecting barrier has been breached.
We rushed out to look, only to see the sky shrouded in dark clouds.
Old man Xuanqing, hand over that dragon brat, and I shall spare your life.
Without a second word, my dad drew his sword and was about to charge up. I quickly bit the hem of his robe to hold him back. Dad, don't be reckless. The sect master uncle pressed down on my dad's shoulder.
All disciples, take your positions.
Yunxiao Palace instantly became a bustle of activity. I was sent to the safest place, the rear hall, guarded by my senior sister, Xuan Minghua.
Junior sister, whatever you do not go out.
I paced around anxiously, but this whole thing started because of me. I couldn't just hide here. As we were speaking, a loud explosion echoed from outside, followed by the screams of disciples. My senior sister and I rushed out at the same time. The front mountain was already in complete chaos. Without the Qingxuang sword, the grand array could not be formed. At a glance, I saw my dad trapped in midair, fighting fiercely with the dragon's clone. He couldn't pull himself away to deliver the sword to the array's core. I stomped my hooves in anxiety. We have to get the sword over there.
I'll go.
No. You will be corrupted. Looking at my half-dragonized body, I had an idea. Let me go. A dragon can withstand it. Without waiting for my senior sister to stop me, I had already charged out. I successfully made it underneath my dad. Dad, throw the sword down. In the midst of his battle, my dad looked down.
Nonsense. Go back.
Trust me just this once. My dad gritted his teeth and threw the Qingxuang sword down to me. I kicked off with my hind legs and caught the Qingxuang sword with my mouth. The dragon noticed my intention, and a bolt of dark light struck down. I instinctively lowered my head, and the dark light grazed past my crystal horn. A crack instantly appeared on the horn. The pain was so intense that I saw stars, but I didn't stop. With all my might, I plunged the Qingxuang sword into it. A pillar of purple light shot up into the sky, forming a massive sword array.
Little beast.
We will meet again. With that unwilling roar, the dark clouds dispersed. My dad was the first to rush over. He cradled my large head to check my injuries.
Silly girl. Who told you to take such a risk?
Am I amazing or what?
Amazing. More like carrying me to death.
The sect master uncle walked over and touched my cracked crystal horn.
Minghua's horn. I'm afraid it can't be saved.
My dad's expression changed instantly.
Sect master brother, could it be?
But it might be a blessing in disguise. Every time a beast breaks a horn, it is a rebirth.
That night, I ran a high fever. The crack on my horn grew larger and larger until finally the entire horn fell off. The pain was so agonizing that I felt half dead. Through my blurry vision, I saw my dad watching over my bedside, his eyes completely bloodshot. My dad quickly leaned in close. Dad.
I'm here. Do you want some water? Do you want to eat some spirit herbs?
I shook my head and nudged his hand with my nose. Dad, don't be sad. The horn will grow back.
Who is sad? I'm just angry that you acted recklessly again.
I nuzzled against his palm, but realized the sensation felt wrong. I raised my paw to feel it. At the base of my broken horn, a tiny bump had actually sprouted. A new horn? My dad leaned in to take a closer look and was also stunned.
This color.
It is not the original crystal color. It is gold, just like my mother's golden beast horn. My broken horn was taken to be enshrined. Unexpectedly.
Oh no, Xuanqingzi has escaped and he stole Minghua's broken horn.
That wretched creature.
I, however, remained very calm. It is fine. Out with the old, in with the new, right?
Oh, you.
By the time my golden horn grew to an inch long, Yunxiao Palace welcomed its first winter snow. In the early morning, my dad came to wake me up and found me leaning out the window, using my newly grown horn to catch snowflakes for fun. My dad's fly whisk smacked right onto my backside.
Xuan Minghua, have you finished reading your books? Yet here you are playing.
Look, Dad, my horn has grown a bit bigger again. My dad couldn't help himself for a moment, a touch of tenderness appearing in his eyes, but he immediately pulled a stern face again.
Stop playing tricks. Playing tricks? If you don't finish copying the books today, your dinner is cancelled.
Just as I was about to act spoiled, a sharp pain shot through my golden horn. Countless fragmented images flashed before my eyes. A cold, gleaming sword blade, golden tears, and my mother's gentle whispers. My dad noticed something was wrong with me.
What is wrong? Does the growing horn hurt?
I shook my head. Those images vanished again. It is nothing. Maybe I ate too many spirit herbs on the sly last night and got bloated. My dad's fly whisk was instantly raised. I quickly hopped over to the desk and began grinding ink, pretending to be busy. In truth, my heart was pounding with anxiety. Ever since the golden horn started growing, these strange visions became more and more frequent. After lunch, I wandered over to the sword pavilion. I wanted to play with my father's Qing sword. Strange to say, in the entire Yunxiao Palace, I loved clinging to this sword the most. I always felt a deep sense of familiarity with it. But the sword pavilion was empty. The Qing sword was gone. While I was wondering about this, suddenly, another sharp pain shot through my golden horn. This time, the pain was so intense that I fell straight to my knees. A clear image flashed before my eyes. 300 years ago, after my mother subdued the demon, just before she passed away, she channeled the last of her power into an egg. The scene shifted. It was my father, holding the sword in the egg, kneeling at demon, subduing Qilin, crying like a child. The sword let out a mournful cry, and a fine crack appeared on its blade.
Minghua.
My father's voice pulled me back to reality. Only then did I realize my face was covered in tears. My golden horn was burning hot. Where is the Qing sword?
Why do you suddenly ask that?
I dreamed of. No, that is not right. I saw. I incoherently described the scene I had just witnessed. The more I spoke, the paler my father's face became. Finally, he let out a long sigh and drew the Qing sword from his sleeve.
This sword cracked on the very day you were born. I originally thought it was because it couldn't bear to part with your mother.
I reached out with my front hoof and touched the edge of the blade. My golden horn burst with brilliant golden light, and the Qing sword glowed with a green light in response. As the two lights merged, I remembered my true origin. I wasn't a Qilin baby at all. The real Qilin baby had passed away with my mother 300 years ago. My mother couldn't bear to see my father lose both his wife and child, so she infused the sword spirit of the Qing sword into that egg. In other words, I was originally just my father's sword. I let out a loud bellow that echoed through the clouds, shaking the tiles of the sword pavilion so hard they rattled down. My father was completely dumbfounded too. Holding the sword in his hand, he stared at me with wide eyes, looking exactly like a frog struck by lightning. So, am I your daughter? Or your sword? My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I was still feeling a bit sad, but my father suddenly burst out laughing.
No wonder you always love running around with a sword in your mouth. And always say the hilt feels like your horn.
Dad, aren't you angry? My father placed the sword in front of me.
Angry. The sword I nurtured for 300 years turned into a Qilin daughter, and she wrecks the house every single day. You tell me, should I be angry?
I shrank my neck, preparing for a scolding, but then I saw my father gently caress the crack on the sword's body.
All these years, it has been hard on you.
It turned out that taking a physical form required a massive toll from a sword spirit, and that crack was the proof. So, what am I now? A sword cow. The sect leader's voice came from the doorway.
It is a sword Qilin, with Qingshuang as the bones, and the Qilin as the flesh, the only one of its kind in history.
My father quickly bowed in greeting. Sect leader, did you know all along?
I had guessed some of it.
My father's eyes welled up with tears again. Just as I was about to comfort him, my golden horn throbbed with pain once more.
Master.
It was Xuanqingzi's voice.
The sword horn is in hand, below the cliff, below the demon, subduing cliff.
Oh no. Xuanqingzi is going to the demon cliff to cause trouble. The sect leader and my dad turned pale at the news. 300 years ago, my mother trapped the nether demon king beneath the demon cliff. Now that Xuanqingzi has stolen my broken horn, he must want to use it to free the demon king.
The entire sect is on high alert. Xuanqing, take Minghua and go first. You must hold the line.
Without a second word, my dad grabbed the Qingshuang sword, preparing to fly. Take me with you.
You stay here. It is too dangerous.
With a leap of my 4 hooves, I jumped onto his back. I am your sword. Didn't you say a sword should never leave its master's side? And just like that, my dad flew on the sword. While I clung to his back, 1 man and 1 cow rushed toward the demon cliff. On the way, my dad asked,
Minghua, since you are a sword spirit, can you turn back into a sword?
I tried my best, my face turning red from the effort. But in the end, I could only turn my tail into a sword tassel. It seems I'm still a bit short of the mark. My dad actually let out a sigh of relief.
Good.
Are you just reluctant to part with your cute little cow?
Shut up. The wind is strong.
When we arrived at the demon cliff, my broken horn was floating in midair, channeling golden light into the cracks of the cliff wall. The entire mountain was shaking, as if some colossal beast was about to burst from the earth.
Stop.
My dad let out a thunderous shout, and the Qingshuang sword flew from his hand. Xuanqingzi dodged in a hurry. The ritual was interrupted.
Master was right. You really did come to deliver yourselves to death.
My master recalled the Qingshuang sword, wielding it so fast it seemed impenetrable, but he was still wounded. Dad, use me. My master froze for a moment, then immediately understood, throwing the Qingshuang sword toward me. The moment the blade made contact with me, my entire body turned into a golden light and merged into the sword. The Qingshuang sword instantly expanded several times over, its entire body flowing with 2-colored light. A dragon pattern emerged at the handguard, and the sword tassel became my always disobedient tail. My father gripped the hilt and instantly felt my presence.
This is Minghua.
I'm right here.
Father and daughter, united as one. Our combined strength can cut through metal.
With my empowerment, the power of the Qingshuang sword surged dramatically. Seeing that things were turning against him, Xuanqingzi turned to flee. How could we, father and daughter, let him get away? My dad caught the sword as it flew back, praising me for once.
Beautiful.
Before we even had time to celebrate, the ground suddenly shook violently. The nether beast was battering the final barrier.
Minghua, as the sword spirit, can you repair the barrier?
I sensed the situation for a moment. I can. But I must fully return to the sword. And I might not be able to turn back into a cow for a while. My dad's hand trembled slightly. I was originally your sword anyway. The cliff face exploded with a loud crash, and black energy surged up into the sky. There was no time to hesitate. I controlled the sword and flew toward the rift. Amidst the brilliant golden light, I took one last look at my dad. Dad, remember to wipe the sword every day. And the tender grass. Don't let the supply run out. The golden light vanished into the rift. Xuan Minghua.
If you dare not to come back, I'll melt the Qingshuang sword down to make a hoe.
This threat was very effective. Struggling with the last shred of my consciousness, I deposited a trace of my power into the golden horn fragment. I don't know how much time passed. I heard a crisp clinking sound, as if someone had placed a metal object onto a stone. I struggled to open my eyes, and saw my dad inserting the Qingshuang sword in front of the Qilin jade. Beside the sword lay my golden horn fragment.
The sect master senior brother said, using the horn as a guide, your spirit can reform within 3 years. If you dare to take any longer,
I was so touched that I wanted to cry. But unfortunately, swords can't cry. I could only vibrate twice to show that I heard him. My dad's eyes welled up with tears. He gently stroked the sword blade.
Dad is waiting for you to come home.
Just like that, I basked in the sun during the day to absorb spiritual energy and listened to my dad's nagging at night. He always said the Qingshu pavilion was too quiet and lonely. But actually, I knew. He was just worried that I would be lonely. In the spring of the second year, a golden flower grew on the Qingshuang sword. After my dad discovered it, he moved his daily morning practice to the front of the sword pavilion. He said he had to keep an eye on it, lest some blind bees try to gather its pollen. In the third year, on the day of the start of winter, the flower on the sword burst with a brilliant golden light. When my dad rushed over at the sound, he happened to see a golden, glittering.
Why is it still a cow?
I happily circled around him. I'm back. I took a bite of his sleeve. My dad smiled from ear to ear.
It is good to have you back.
He grabbed a handful of tender grass and handed it to me. I chewed and chewed contentedly, thinking to myself, Dad, just get ready to be annoyed by me for the rest of your life.